Hello, everyone. We are getting close to the final exam. Most of you are having your projects turned in, so we're just right at the end of the class. I wanted to give you a couple pieces related to the technology portion. I think it's pretty clear on the page, but I wanted to remind you there are 5 parts on the exam. And for those 5 parts on the exam, you only have to do 3. Okay? Everybody has to do part 1. Everybody has to do at least one of the next 2 and at least one of the last 2. And so if you're kind of looking at it on this technology portion, again, download this file, type your stuff right into the blanks and then upload it. Every student has access to Office, the full Office version 365 through your MiraCosta account. I had a link through that in the last exam. So I've tried to make it very clear and highlight required problem. Everyone must do this problem, so there's no issue whatsoever. You will need to download the data files and then just go through and do it. Create a scatter plot. If you use RStudio, include the line of code. If you use ArtofStat, you don't need to because there won't be a code line. But the first one should not have a line. The first one is just the scatter plot. Then later you go down and you draw the line on the scatter plot. That's down here in number 4. Determine the slope and the y-intercept. You can do that with RStudio or web apps. It doesn't matter. They both do it for you. And then write the equation of the line of best fit. And if you choose, if you want to just handwrite it out, just take a picture of that, upload that into the document, that's fine. But you can also type it out. Doesn't matter. Either one works for me. And let's see here. Then there's a little bit to do with the R value and the R squared value. And remember, those are values related to kind of how well the line fits the data. And then using your model estimate. I guess the only piece in here I'd want to make sure is make it very clear when you read this, using the data, we check to see if median SAT score is a good way to predict the response variable of 6-year graduation rate. So at times, some students put those in backwards. We're not using 6-year graduation rate to predict SAT scores. That wouldn't make sense because by the time you've graduated, your SAT score is very old. So we're trying to go one direction. Someone coming into college using the SAT score and trying to determine if that SAT score tells you about the 6-year graduation rate. Okay. Scrolling on down, I've highlighted out of parts 2 and 3, you must do at least one problem. You can choose to do both, totally fine. You can choose to do both for up to 5 points of extra credit. One of them will be an ANOVA, one of them will be a chi-squared. You have to choose which one is which if you choose to do them. Okay. So totally fine. And in all cases, make sure that you go down and do the analysis that you would come up with. And then at the moment, I guess I should say at the end, when you're looking back on it, you should say whether or not this is appropriate. So again, at times you might say, hey, it failed this condition, but I want you to continue working everything through and then say at the end, I can't really give you a firm analysis. It looks this direction, but kind of coming to that conclusion would be inappropriate. Okay, sometimes something is inappropriate. That's okay. And then I ask you to do a little tweak. So at times for this one, I'm going to ask you to switch the data from the row and columns. So right now my column titles are rural, suburban, and urban. And my row are good grades, popularity, and athletic ability. I'm going to ask you to switch those if you do part 3 and then see how the data changes. Okay. And then up here for the fun size, your backup, your extra little piece will be visual information in the form of a side-by-side box plot. So make sure that you include those with your information. Let's scroll on down to exam 2 portion. Some of you are really looking forward to this part because this is your chance to redo 2 questions. If you do both questions, I will take your total from this and I will replace your exam 2 technology portion if it is better. So some of you have already messaged and said, what if I do worse? I'm not a total a-hole. If it's better, I'll replace it. If not, you probably already got the lower grade anyway. So I'll take it at that. But I'll give you the option because I think for some of you, you now, as you do the project, you're going through it, you might be saying to yourself, this is perfect. I totally understand it now. Give me one more chance. Here's your one more chance. So just understand these questions look very similar to what you did on test number 2 with the technology. Okay, very, very similar. Notice your very last question is, whatever you did in your analysis, whether it's a confidence interval or a hypothesis test, I want you to perform the other one. So if you did a confidence interval in this one to start, you would do a hypothesis test in the very last piece, and vice versa. If you did a hypothesis test, I want you to do a confidence interval on the variable that you're looking at. Okay, show the code and explain if it confirms or validates the conclusion that you made in number 29 in this case. Okay. And scroll down. If you did, you can, again, you have to do one of these, but I'll let you take your pick. So in this case, this is kind of a follow-up. So some of you were like, can't you figure out how much is in a fun-sized bag of M&Ms from the last exam? And I was like, I don't know, I guess. So I went and tried to find it. And so here you go. So here you go. It's interesting because a fun-sized bag of M&Ms, it says 2 packs is 36 grams or 3 packs is 40 grams. So it's a little weird. It's not exactly just telling you how much is in 1 pack. So you actually have to do a little tiny bit of math to get there. And so that's the first part. Go through and find the weight of 1 pack based on your color. And again, it's based on your student ID. And then go through and figure it out. See if there's evidence the company's claim is not truthful. Again, this is their claim. They're telling you this is what they're saying is in a bag. So maybe that gives you some tips. Once again, when you get to the end, whatever you did, do the other one. So if you're using web apps, you can just choose the other option from the drop down. If you are using RStudio and you did a confidence interval, then just put in repeat. Basically, it's the same code. You just add your population parameter in. So, add like a p value in or a mu value in, and that'll be your population mean as your null hypothesis. If you already did the hypotheses and you're doing a confidence interval, then just go back and remove the mu part and just let it run again, and it'll give you a confidence interval for RStudio. And again, just choose the drop down on the web apps, and you can make sure you type in the appropriate information and you'll be good to go. All right, and that's it. That's your technology portion of the test. So I had a few people asking, wait, are you telling me I only have to do 3 questions? Yes, that's all you have to do. If you wanted a chance for a little extra credit, if you wanted a chance to redo that Technology 2 test, this is it, right? This is your final exam. So I hope you take advantage of that. All right, now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing. And you get to look at my mug for a little bit while I go through the Canvas timed test. I know some of you have said, can you give us that, like what's going to be on the test? Perfect. Great question. The test is comprehensive. And so let me go ahead and walk you through it. Okay. So the final exam should be longer. It's not. It's actually a little bit shorter. So all the other exams had 15 questions. This one has 13 questions. And then I threw a little bonus question in because it's the end of the term and everybody could probably use a break. So I'm going to go through them question by question. Right now, again, comprehensive. So I'll kind of try to give you an idea where this is coming from. So in the first question, you're going to get a statement about a study. And you have to determine whether the study was observational, experiment, did it involve random sampling? Do we have random assignment? So these are the terms that we use near the beginning, so around test 1, and you should understand what those terms represent. Question 2 is an essay type question. I'm going to ask you to put into words what we're doing. And this question is about kind of one of the key concepts that we cover in statistics. I can't give you too much more about that, but basically someone who is not taking a stats class makes a statement about 2 graphs, 2 graphical displays. They make a statement, and then you have to explain kind of what would you say to that person and maybe give some reasons why the data look the way they do. Okay. Question number 3 is going to be about sampling. So 2 people are looking at a group and they go out and they take samples, and we talk about what happens, the size of the confidence interval. So this looks familiar concept to the previous exam. If you want to have a smaller confidence interval or a larger confidence interval, what should you do? And then kind of, if we're both using the same level of confidence, what do we know based on the number of people? So it's about understanding confidence intervals and that margin of error. Question 4. Now, question 4 is going to be some side-by-side box plots. And it's really about you understanding what those box plots represent. So this does go back. Some of the questions are going to go back around the test 1, where we talked about kind of understanding a box plot and those, what the lines mean, what the boxes mean, and how that the line in the very middle represents the median, and the lines that form the box in the middle are the quartiles, 25%, 75% marks. And so you have those little pieces going up and down at the bottom sometimes, and those, remember, every chunk of that is 25% of your data. I'm just trying to get you to explain how that relates to a particular graph. So reading and interpreting a graph and then saying, is there maybe evidence to suggest something from the graph? Okay. And you're all going to get different graphs on there, but they're pulling from a pool of questions, but the questions are going to be very, very similar. But choose the best answer from the answers given. Those will be kind of a drop down type, not an essay type. Question 5 talks about confidence intervals and really comparing two, like a 50% confidence level and a 95% confidence level. Like, why is one better than the other and why are they different? Once again, this will be a drop down option. Question 6 comes from something more recent. Okay, so this would be, you have to decide whether it's a chi-square, whether it's a NOVA-F test, hypothesis test for 2 proportions, or hypothesis test for 2 means, and you kind of have to look at the data that's given to you. I will do everything for you, so you'll have all the results there, and you'll have a p-value, and then you have to kind of go through and say, do I have convincing evidence? Are there any issues with this? And make sure you understand the conditions. So on your cheat sheet, some people call it a cheat sheet. It's not cheating if you're bringing your notes page to a test that you can use your notes on. But that's a good question. I would have stuff about chi-squared. What are the conditions on it? What does it tell me? I'd have the ANOVA down. Hey, what am I looking for? What does a p-value represent? What does it tell me as I do the data? Question 7. So question 7 is going to be kind of similar to test number 2. What does that mean? I'm going to give you RStudio code and Web Apps code. So I don't care which way you're looking at it. Okay, whichever one you were used to, you can look at the data and you'll be able to analyze it. And what you'll do then is I'll give you a situation, and this is an essay question. So you would interpret the p-value in the context of the problem. And my directions say the significance level should not come up in this explanation. And I know that we've had this on 2 different exams now, and it was on the project, and it was on the take-home, the technology part for test 2. Interpreting a p-value in the context is some skill that you should have at the end of this class. So I'm going to make sure to ask you about it. And then make a conclusion about the problem. This is where you can make a conclusion that says I reject or don't reject the null hypothesis. Or maybe your conclusion, if you get the confidence interval problem, will be that I am so confident that the actual value is between these numbers. So that's what you're going to do. So you have 2 parts there. This question's worth quite a bit. So it's worth 20 points. Again, it's an essay question, roughly 10 points per part. But make sure you go through and answer both parts as you do this. Question 8. Question 8, once again, I give you Web Apps and RStudio output. And you basically, a student is given a question and they go through and they write the code in there. And you have to go through and analyze what the student did, because they might have done some things correct and they might have done some things incorrect. So read the statement, look at the code that they typed in, or you can look at the results from Web Apps, because both of them are there, and you have to decide whether the student did things correctly or incorrectly. Did they meet the conditions? Did they use the proper test, etc.? Okay, all of those are going to be dropped down. That will not be an essay question. Question 9. So this one goes back a little bit more towards test 1. This one gives you a two-way table, and it actually is talking about some of the COVID false positive, false negative rates kind of thing. But from back in, it's almost 2 years ago, but it was from Johns Hopkins. And so I have information from them, and you have to go through and kind of answer, hey, based on this table, what is the probability somebody tests positive? Or what's the probability somebody tests negative? If you want to go back and look at test number 1, the question I put on test number 1, I think involved like green, was it like green and yellow bean sprouts or something like that, and they had flowers coming off of them, and then you created the table. So this one, the table is already created for you. You just have to do the analysis, and everything is going to be a drop down. Okay. Question 10. So this is our first one in the linear regression type. So there's going to be some questions about lines. I put in the code that was used to find the intercept, everything that's there, and you can see the graph. So I'll give you all that data. I'll give you the R and the R squared values, and then you have to just answer some questions about it. Okay. What is the explanatory? What is the response variable based on the graph? Tell me about what is predicted. If I give you some values, you should be able to put them into that line equation and come out with some outputs. So that's what we're going to ask you to do. And again, those are all drop down options. So kind of like multiple choice. Then what you do is, that's like a part 1. Question 11 goes back to this, basically the same equation you just had. And I ask you to interpret the meaning of the slope. So when you started thinking about slope, maybe it's an increasing slope, maybe it's decreasing. So if it's the stock market, let's say the slope was like 57.25, then you'd say, oh, the stock market is dropping 57 points per day or something like that. So interpret the meaning and make sure you include the appropriate units. Whether it's positive or negative, positive would be increasing, negative would be decreasing. So that's a slope question. Question 12. I'm going to now give you a couple different models. Some of them will be linear, like lines. Others will be exponential. Those were the non-linear graphs we did right at the end, module 28. So these come from the last 2 modules, and you have to decide. Some of them have a negative association, some of them have a positive, some are exponential, some are not. You have to identify them, and then you have to interpret one of them. And let's see here, question 13. This is a good one to have on your sheet no matter what, because you got it. It's come up in a couple other questions. This one's going to involve normality conditions. So what do I have to check in order to use a specific test? So whether it's proportions or means, there are different things you have to check. And so I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to put a bunch of things down there, and you just have to tell me, hey, I'm checking for means. This is what I have to do. For proportions, I have to do this. Okay. That was question 13. I said there's only 14 questions on here, and question 14 is worth 0 points, but it allows me to score it up to 5 additional points. And this is a chance for you to think back on the entire course and say, hey, out of all the things I've learned, this one was the most interesting to me. This one was the most relevant to me. Or maybe you didn't watch this video and you studied something that is not on the final exam, and you're kind of frustrated about that because you put time into it. This happens from time to time. And so I'll tell you what, if you studied something and you really understand it, if you can show me you understand it, then I will give you the extra points. That is it. So this exam is probably a little bit less time than prior exams. Essay questions in number 2. I mentioned this already, number 2. Number 7 is an essay question. And number 11 is an essay question. And then question 14 is kind of an essay, but it's the bonus one. So not really the same. All right, that about does it. That's our final exam. So I'll be grading the projects over this next week. And if you've already turned in some of the the technology tests or those will be getting graded as they kind of come in. And what else? Oh, grade wise, if you, I did say that I would drop things like your lowest unit checkpoint I'll drop, and your lowest 2 module checkpoints, I believe. But I won't do that until the end of the class, like the very end of the class. And that's because if you want to go back and redo them, you can until July 23rd. At 11:59, the class ends. That's it. That's the last day. So if you have anything else you wanted to try to get in and get points on, that's your day to do it. You got until then. If you do have any other questions, please let me know. Exams must be turned in by the 23rd. Okay, that's the technology portion and the Canvas portion. You have until 11:59. Any questions, send me an email. I meet with students on Zoom. I've met with probably a dozen students over the last 2 days. If you have questions, let me know, and I will jump into Zoom and make sure you're on the right track. All right, that's it for now. Have a great night and a good last week. All right, take care.